Delight Your Marriage, episode 40.
Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage. Here's your host, Belah Rose.
Hi. Now, I just want to quickly start off by saying, am I the only one that dances through that introduction every time? Yeah, sorry if it's getting old for you. It's fresh for me each time. Okay, so thank you so much for spending your time with me today on this podcast. I am thrilled that hopefully I'll actually get to hear how you're doing live on the webinar on Tuesday. And I just was on the phone with my coach and we've put together a pricing strategy. Actually, this is the first time I am offering a webinar that's this format, that is, that actually looks and feels like this. So it's easy to do if you've ever been on a webinar, but the point is, go to delightyourmarriage.com/webinar, sign up, because it's only going to be free for the first 2 weeks. So I hope that you're going to be able to be there live with me. If for some reason you can't, after that, it's actually going to be costing $47. So hopefully you'll be able to get in on it beforehand. But if not, hey, $47 is not that big of a deal to, again, how to make him wild for you is the topic, which I go into the 5 secrets to bring love and passion in your marriage in God's plan. So please put June 30th on your calendar, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and go to delightyourmarriage.com/webinar. And I will talk with you then. At least sign up. So then if you can't make it live, I'll be able to send you the link that'll expire in the 2 weeks. Now, today is such a fantastic second part of the interview with Luke. If you didn't get a chance to listen in on episode 39, you're going to want to do that. Luke talks about sex education from 0 till like 10 to 12 before lust becomes an issue. And then in this episode, man, he gives an incredible picture of what a real man can be like and should be like, even in our sex-saturated world today. God has got his hand on the work Covenant Eyes is doing, and specifically, I'm so honored to have Luke continue to share what a real man looks like in this episode. So let's dive in.
So would you be willing to now dive into what about these older kids that are, like you said, getting into the lust area, where it's visuals
let's talk about it. So
with it.
Again, we're talking here about now we're talking about masturbation as it is connected to or linked to lust. There's one study that states, on average, boys experience their first conscious ejaculation at 12.9 years old, so just less than 13 years old. One study suggests that in the technical term for the first conscious ejaculation is semenarche. The other studies state the average is maybe a little older, maybe 13 and a half years old. Okay. But nonetheless, around 13, maybe a little older, 13 and a half, is the average age for the first conscious ejaculation for most boys. Now, whether that could happen through a result of masturbation or that could be through a nocturnal emission or wet dream. Yeah. Now, for most, I will say this, for most American boys, in terms of North American boys, that is more often than not the result of masturbation, not a wet dream. So I think this is important for parents to understand, especially North American parents, is that generally speaking, if you're finding evidence in their clothing, evidence of ejaculation, that's not that we don't. That could be the result of a wet dream, but in North America, most first time ejaculations are because of masturbation. So,
I see.
There's something to keep in mind. In retrospect, speaking very personally here, in retrospect of my own life, I learned about masturbation probably the same way other guys did. I discovered it completely on my own.
Okay.
No one talked to me about it.
Wow.
No one told me how to do it. I didn't even have a name for it for the first several years of my adolescence. I didn't even know what it was called. It wasn't included in any sex talks from my parents or the public school system. It wasn't until I heard a group of friends at school joking around about jacking off or jerking off, and then that I discovered that it was all, I heard the crude phrases they were using, stuff like that. And then it was like, is this what I'm doing? Is this what I've been doing for the last 2 years, 3 years that I didn't even know what it was called? No clue. And I think a lot of parents don't know how to talk about it. It's important to remember that kids are experiencing their first conscious attraction maybe around age 10-ish, 10, 11, and then 11, 12 when their first sexual fantasies come about, which isn't surprising then that masturbation on average is happening at the latter end of 12 or getting into 13. I think it's important here then for parents to just lay a groundwork of teaching about what is lust and why is it sinful. What does that look like? So a couple things to keep in mind. One, I would say make sure that you make a distinction between attraction and lust. This is, I can't overstate this enough. Especially for Christian parents, it's easy to lump sexual attraction into lust because it feels safer to put the boundary line way back. And it is important for wisdom standpoint to put the boundary line. You don't want to be always dangling over the edge of a boundary line. You want to stay back from it. If there's a reason why you don't go, you should never be charging for the boundary line. So yes, attraction is but lust is not attraction, and attraction is not lust. For a boy to be attracted to a girl is as natural as the day is long. For a guy to think a girl is attractive is perfectly normal and good and godly. Godly in the sense that God created it. So it is normal. It is normal for a boy to find a woman attractive and for a boy to wonder or even be curious about things like what does sex feel like, and that stuff is just very normal. How we respond to the attraction is the key. It dives into fantasy and eventually stimulation and masturbation and orgasm. That's where we have to really apply biblical principles to understand how do we deal with this thing called lust. What is lust? It's important for kids to understand. Lust is basically, I think Joshua Harris's definition of lust is a very simple definition, but it's very good. Lust is craving sexually what God has forbidden. Lust is craving sexually what God has forbidden. And I think the word craving is a good word because you're not talking about wanting. You're talking about something that has started to more or less consume your emotional and mental energy. So that's what lust is. So that's what we're telling our kids to avoid. Attraction is not the problem. It's lust. Now, at the same time, we also want to tell them attraction can very easily become lust. So you don't want to just draw the distinction and then say, attraction's all good, so never guard your heart in respect to it. No, we should always guard our heart in respect to anything good or bad. But we need to remember attraction's good. You should be attracted to women. That's normal. You need to guard your heart in that area because it easily can become lust. That's the first thing. Second thing I'd say is really help kids, especially teens, as they're learning more about their own bodies, as learning about attraction, is to really help them remember that lust is, in the Bible, lust is a form of idolatry. And this can be a heady concept, but I think a teenager can easily wrap their mind around it. Lustful fantasy at its heart is like a sexually charged mental movie. So boys will cast the latest crush or the crushes that they have as the leading lady of the movie going on in their minds. And in that film, that woman plays a certain role. She reads the script that she's been given. And what's the point of this whole movie in the mind? The point of this whole movie is that that woman is not the main character. The main character of that fantasy is the boy. Because it makes him feel good about himself. That woman, her sexual prowess, her attractiveness, her whatever, is a validation to him that She wants me. She likes me.
Yeah.
I can draw her to myself.
Yeah.
There's a great little book. It's by Winston Smith. It's called "It's All About Me: The Problem with Masturbation." It's a great, very short little book. You could even give it to a teenager. He talks about this. He notes that this is the sinful nature of lust. It's turning someone into an object that revolves around you.
Yes.
So that's the nature of that's the idolatrous nature of lust. Lustful fantasy is creating a you-centered fantasy that plays to your desires for pleasure, for power, for control. And so, in fact, even then in the book, he kind of likens lustful fantasy to this, like playing God. He says, no matter how widely your fantasies may vary, in every instance you play God with people. You reduce those made in the image of the true God to mindless robots who serve your whims.
Wow.
So that's important for kids to understand, that this is not just something that is a biological thing. It is that.
Yes.
But it's more than that.
Yes.
This is a choice you're making to create a fantasy world where it's all about you and your desires. And that's, we're, as Christians, we're not called to create, we're not called to escape into fantasy, a fantasy like that. We're called to escape into God, into a God-centered world, not to an us-centered world.
Wow.
So it's really important for kids to grapple with the fact that that's why lust is an offense to God. It's not just an offense to their own bodies or to other people. It's an offense to God because God should be the one who captivates our hearts. He should be the one who's the center of our, emotional life and all that we are, not our own whims and pleasures in this sort of you-centered world. So it's important to teach the truth to your son that lust is offensive to God because it is self-idolatry. Now, that said, while it may feel good to get a girl's attention in your imagination, while it may feel good to have that sense of it feels exciting, it feels thrilling to lust, it's important to always replace that with, but remember, it's not about lust or nothing. It's not you're just getting rid of something. You're getting something too. You're running, not just running from lust, you're running to God, whose favor and attention is far better than the favor and attention that any woman can give you. It is we have to remember that we're not just if we just live in a world where it's where the choice is between lust and nothing or porn and nothing, that's a bleak world we live in. But we don't live in that kind of world. We live in a world where we can replace idolatrous fantasy with a thirst for the living God and for a thirst for the love that he imparts to us, love he shows us. And so that's important for kids, even when kids are teenagers, to start seeing that. I think another thing that's really important is we have to teach our sons that lust really robs women of their dignity. Christian men, in 1 Timothy 5:2, it says Christian men are to treat older women as mothers, younger women as sisters in all purity. So
praise God. Thank you so much. That's brilliant.
It's right. If we're to follow the lead of our porn-saturated culture, though, we would say treat older women as cougars and younger women as fairly legal. That is... We live in a porn-saturated culture that would lead us to treat women as objects, and so as raising boys, we have to say to them, look, noticing a girl's attractiveness is normal and good, but what matters is if they allow that attraction to turn to a strong craving through gazing, fantasizing, objectifying.
Right.
We do not want to objectify a woman, so that means. We need to tell our especially our teen boys, our adolescent boys that girl is somebody's daughter.
Amen.
So you need to understand that girl is somebody's daughter. Now, I would also add this too is that lust is, and I think this sounds very contrary to what the world will say, but lust is very unmanly. I think this is really important to get because manliness is often associated with lust in the world. That manliness is gauged by your sexual prowess and your ability to bang the hot girl. That is, that is the pinnacle of manliness in some non-Christian circles. What it's? I have the prize, the trophy woman.
Right.
And so we need to understand, but biblically speaking, lust is unmanly. I love John Piper's definition of biblical manhood. I think it's a really strong definition, full of a lot of nuances, and I don't have time to go into all the nuances, but I think it's really good. He says, at the heart of mature masculinity is a sense of benevolent responsibility to lead, provide for, and protect women in ways appropriate to a man's differing relationships. So, for instance,
wow.
That
is nuanced and heavy. I'm excited. Keep going.
This is heavy stuff, but he's basically, think about
so good.
We want our boys to honor and prize the women around them, not be patronizing or authoritarian to them. We want our boys to accept the responsibility of servant-hearted leadership, not taking what they can get from others. Wow. If they get married, we want our boys to become strong and tender lovers, not forceful, not impotent. If they become fathers, we want them to take the lead in their homes, discipling our grandchildren.
Yes.
And we want our boys to see Christ not just as their Savior, but as the ultimate example of what a humble, self-sacrificing man is meant to become. And this is key. Lust is unmanly because Christ, who was the perfect man, and therefore the most humanly, ergo the first, most manly man ever, never lusted after a woman. He never looked on upon a woman with objectifying eyes. He never touched a woman in an inappropriate way.
Wow.
Because he was the most human, the most authentically human, that is, right? I mean, in some sense, we lost part of our humanity or the intention of our humanity, the image of godness in us. I mean, it was marred by the fall. It was marred by sin, even though we're still made in the image of God. But Christ came to restore that in us, and he did that partially by becoming man himself. He then, therefore, is the ultimate example of what a man ought to be. And what was that? He died for his bride. He didn't. He lived and died for her sake, to beautify and purify her. And so this is really key. This is biblical manhood, and we need to understand this. Lustful fantasy really just makes a man feel like a man without requiring him to be one.
Oh my gosh, that's so good! Wow. Okay, let me say it. Say it one more time.
All of it? Just the last part.
No, the entire thing. No. That one phrase that you said about requiring him to be a man. Well, what was the first part? The whole thing.
Makes a man feel like a man, but without requiring him to be one.
Ugh, that is so good. Yes.
So we have to get that. So I would just in summary, real quick, we need to remember attraction is not lust. Yeah. Lust is idolatry, therefore sinful against God. Lust robs women of their dignity, therefore it's a sin against women. And lust is unmanly, so it's a sin against their own manliness. It's a sin against their own, in a sense, their own humanity. We are not built for that. That's not what we're for. And even to put a real positive spin on this for your kids, be able to tell your boys, you have an attraction to women, and someday, God willing, if that turns into marriage, that's going to turn into a vigorous and hearty, and I might add, very pleasurable pursuit of your wife, and that is a good thing. However, you do not want to cheapen that by just diving into this realm of fantasy. And, that is, in other words, that's not what your manliness is for. As John Piper defines it, I think it's a good definition, the benevolent responsibility to lead, provide for, and protect women. That is what your manliness is for. That is what your humanness as a man is for. So use that. Now, is that going to involve, are you attracted to women? Well, of course you are. That's how God made you. But if how are you going to use that How are you going to use that attraction? Are you going to temper those thoughts so that you can treat all women in all purity as mothers and sisters, or are you going and then of course eventually to date, court, and pursue one woman well for the rest of your life? Is that what you're going to use it for, or are you going to use it to just dive into fantasy? I got a friend who speaks at a lot of conferences, and he's talking, especially talks to teens and young adults, college age students, and stuff like that. And I think the way he puts it is really good. He says, I think just a lot of guys are waking up to the fact that sneaking off to masturbate in front of a computer screen, fantasizing about women who wouldn't give you the time of day in real life, is really not all that cool. And I think, while that's a funny way of saying it, I think it's true. Is this really what the kind of man you want to be? Do you want to be the kind of guy who grows up, maybe he gets married, and while his wife is alone in bed, he's sneaking downstairs to the den to masturbate to digital prostitutes who could care less about you,
of course,
who don't even know you,
right?
Who you're escaping into this world of fantasy. Is this the kind of man you aspire to become in life? No one aspires to be that kind of guy, and no one dives into a world of porn and lust and fantasy thinking of the long term. They think of the short term, quick buzz.
That's right.
It's easy, it's quick, it's simple. But it's like, well, is this the kind of man I really want to be, though? I want to be manly in the truest biblical sense, in the Christ-honoring sense. I want to be a man who does not rob women of their dignity. I don't want to be a man who's enslaved to idols in the heart. I want to be a man who's in love with God. I want to be a man who celebrates his attraction to women and doesn't fear it, but also doesn't treats it well, has a self-mastery, that I'm not a slave to my attraction to women. When I see a woman who's attractive, that I can acknowledge the fact, you created me, God, to be attracted to women. Thank you, God, for doing that. I'm not a slave to that, though. I'm not. That is not my master. That is not my. And more specifically, because Christ is in me, because I'm united to the living Christ, that is not my master. I would be my master if I was, completely disconnected from Christ, but it is not my master. That's not my identity. And I think it's just important for teens to get this early, very, very early.
Yes.
Can I quote one more guy that I really like?
Absolutely.
Okay, C.S. Lewis. Everyone likes him. Okay. He wrote a private letter to a friend of his, and he mentioned masturbation, and I love this quote.
Okay.
It's you have to, probably shouldn't be even reread aloud. You probably just have to read it personally with your eyes. But this is great. He says, "For me, the real evil of masturbation would be that it makes an appetite, which, in its lawful use, leads the individual out of himself to complete and correct his own personality, in order that into that of another, and it turns it says, and then it takes this desire and turns it back, sends the man back into the prison of himself, there to keep a harem of imaginary brides, and in this harem, once admitted, works against his ever getting out and really uniting with a real woman. For this harem is always accessible, always subservient, calls for no sacrifices or adjustments, and can be endowed with erotic and psychological attractions which no real woman can rival. Among those shadowy brides he is always adored, always the perfect lover. No demand is made on his unselfishness, no mortification ever imposed on his vanity. In the end, they become merely the medium through which he increasingly adores himself. After all, almost the main work of life is to come out of ourselves, out of the little dark prison we're all born in. Masturbation is to be avoided, as all things are to be avoided which retard this process. The danger is that of coming to love that prison." Brilliant, so he said, but he basically says that, look, the whole point of life is to get outside of ourselves and serve and die for others. That's the whole point. That's what Christ has modeled for us. That is what we are to do. Masturbation is an eroticized fantasy, and when it becomes a habit and then becomes part of our character, it's the retardation of that whole process.
Wow.
And so I think it's really good. Man, I wish 13, 14, 15-year-olds are taught this stuff, not when they're 30 and addicted to porn and need to wake up, or whatever. That was my story. I think that is really important for kids to grapple with this stuff kind of early.
Yes. What a real man is. Yes. I love that. I love that. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm just so excited that you're doing this work, Luke. It's just so brilliant. Praise God. Okay, well, you've been kind enough to even touch on a lot of the questions already that I was hoping to ask you.
Great.
So in terms of time, I know we're limited, but I want to ask you, for the husband that's listening, how does this, maybe even a little bit more dialed down, when you shared that picture of, the husband leaving his wife to go into this fantasy world that's, let's say a husband's listening and just needs so much more information to really understand how bad this is. Like that was a good picture. He doesn't want to be that, very embarrassing picture of a man. No. But what are some other things that you could share with us how does this mess him up?
Well, there's a whole lot you can say about that.
Yeah,
let me tell you a couple
course.
Stories, actually.
Thank you. Yeah.
And these are kind of research specific stories. I think is really important. Well, first I'll tell you a personal story. I was someone who was, I think I was introduced to porn young. I don't even remember when. It was probably in my teen years, probably. But it was so infrequent because really the internet was not a part of my childhood, at least not much, not until my later teen years. When I got into college, I started working at a video rental store. And that was an awful experience because I was working right there next to all the adult movie. There was a whole back room. Now, quite frankly, that little back room was a little bit too much for my eyes to handle. I didn't like going back there because it was just such an overload. Going from not doing a whole lot. I mean, other than adolescent fantasy, to that, it was pretty hardcore material, and I was like, it was really just kind of over. It was just too much. But there was plenty of smut on the shelves, on the normal shelves. Plenty of R-rated stuff. Plenty of other things, just cheesy skin flicks that are out there that were pornographic enough of themselves. Then I, discovering pornography online. It just quickly was a downward spiral for me. And for years, I was enslaved to this. And when I say enslaved, I mean sneaking out of the house, buying porn DVDs, sneaking out to go to other locations where I could get free internet access so that I could download porn and that kind of stuff. I mean, I was doing it all the time. And I was doing this while not just as a professing Christian, but as someone who was working in vocational ministry on a college campus. So I was living this terrible, terrible double life. And it was, that was one of the worst parts of the whole thing was this sense of course. This sense of hypocrisy and shame and all kinds of things. And it was
I know
just
that
awful,
feeling so well.
Yeah, awful feeling. Yeah, I know you've talked about your own story in that regard too. And it was an awful feeling. And at the time I was single and really sort of, that was a battle because I really didn't know how I would get into a real relationship with a real woman feeling as messed up as I did.
Wow.
God willing, coming out of it, I could tell that story too someday. But coming out of how that happened. But the point of it was, what I'm trying to say is that I get that feeling of total hopelessness, and how it impacted my mind. Before I knew it, it seemed like everybody and everything was turning into a sexual object for me. It was like everything became a trigger for something.
Wow.
There was a study that was done it was published. It was done a couple of years ago. It was published last year. A Cambridge neuroscientist was conducting a study comparing the brains of those with compulsive sexual behaviors, such as watching pornography, to the brains of otherwise healthy subjects. And it's interesting. In a laboratory setting, she had a group of subjects that they said that were self-professed, sex addicts or porn addicts, and another set of subjects that were not. and she would flash images in front of their minds, and then do these neurological scans of their brain.
Okay.
While she was doing these MRI scans of their brain, she discovered that the brains of people who are sexually addicted show that their brains are actually very similar to the brains of alcoholics. Showing that this is more evidence that's coming out recently that's showing that that the porn is actually reshaping the brain of its users. Very specifically, one of the things it's doing is right behind your forehead there is this region of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, and this area of the brain is kind of the executive control center of the brain. It's the wisdom center. It's the area of your brain that makes choices based on principles, not on gut reactions or instincts or impulses.
Wow.
Now, what happens is when impulses, as we all have them, for whatever that is, food, sex, fear, fright, anything, right? When those impulses come from the midbrain up to the prefrontal cortex's job is to regulate that and to say, I'm going to make a choice what I'm going to do.
Okay.
What happens is that area behind the brain actually begins to diminish its power the more porn is consumed. This is a concept that's seen in a number of different kinds of physiological problems, such as schizophrenia or those kind of things, but also in cases of addiction to drugs, to alcohol. They see this. It's called hyperfrontality, and it's just a fancy word. Hypo meaning less than or diminish. Frontality meaning the frontal lobes of the brain. Hypofrontality. It's when that area of the brain doesn't work as well as it should. And so when those impulses and those cravings come up, it does not have the ability to regulate them. So it is experienced in the brain as an overwhelming sensation and need. And it's this craving that comes, and I remember it well personally, that feeling of I have to have this.
Yes.
It's even when you've made promises to yourself that you will not do it again. You've had this craving that comes up and it says, just one more time. Right. Right. That feeling. And anyone who's ever been addicted to anything knows that feeling. It's an awful, it's an awful feeling. Yeah. A feeling out of control. And, which is why you can't just tell an addict, well, don't, I mean, you could tell an addict not to do something. And an addict can not do something. I mean, they could put themselves in a situation where they won't act out, but they can't necessarily regulate the craving itself or that sensation. I've heard it said. Was listening to one addiction expert talking about this, and he said, if you put a glass of alcohol in front of an alcoholic, and who's not in recovery or anything, you put a glass of alcohol in front of an alcoholic, and that craving comes. People who may have never experienced addiction before might, say, well, you mean if I put a gun to that guy's head, he would still drink if I told him not to? Well, no, he may not drink, but you know what his brain is thinking? His brain is thinking, how quickly can I get that alcohol to my brain before that bullet hits it? That's what his brain is doing. Even if his rational processes are saying, I don't want to take a shot, he's not. His other parts of his brain are in the driver's seat at this point. No, he may not choose to drink, but he will not be able to choose the craving or choose not the craving. So that's important to understand. So now the good news is that the brain actually heals itself, given the right conditions and the right choices and the right circumstances.
That is good news.
And, the brain can actually heal itself. The brain is a miraculous organ. It can do all kinds of great healing. So it can heal itself, and with given time and attention, you can overcome these things. So that's good. But it's important for guys to understand that this porn thing is not just a moral failing, although it is that.
Right.
It's also something that I think we're beginning to see a little bit what God revealed in 1 Corinthians 6, where Paul said, he who sins sexually sins against his own body. I think that we're starting to see more glimmers of what that actually means. It doesn't just mean, an emotional connection that shouldn't be there. It doesn't just mean the possibility of pregnancies and STDs and whatever else. It also means that there's actually a neurological impact that is making the body itself sick. It's doing something to the brain that is making it not performing it at the kind of peak performance it should. And that's a problem. I hesitate to call it a disease.
Yeah.
I know people call addiction a disease, and I think it's a well-meaning term. Even the Bible calls sin, even uses a disease metaphor when talking about sin. But it's important for people to understand. In calling it that, if that's what we call it, addiction, that is never meant to excuse the person of their actions. If it is a slavery, but it is a self-chosen slavery. And we get into our minds that, this is impacting me neurologically. This is hurting me physically. This is one of the reasons why God said not to do it, because he created me to follow. My nature was created to follow his moral law. And so it shouldn't surprise us that when we go outside of that there are side effects, that there are problems that our body experiences. So, we need to understand this is something that can really screw up your brain. And so we need to get that.
Wow.
That would be main thing I'd say to men, at least in terms of how it's jacking men up neurologically and physiologically. Yeah.
And I just love that we could go in so much deeper. It's you just have so much great resources. I want to just mention also for anyone, there were a couple of things that we're not going to have time to go into that I really wanted to, but the great thing is that Luke has got amazing resources all online. I'm going to have everything linked up, but specifically Covenant Eyes, he has got posts that come out. It seems like twice a week at least. How often is it? It's a lot.
It's quite a bit. Usually
quite
4 or 5 times a week or so.
4 times, yeah. So flood yourself with how to get free of this. So a couple of things I wanted to get into was how for a husband can get free, the steps. And like I said, maybe Luke can even send me an article that I can link up specifically that someone can kind of go through practically how to get free from this. But the thing I want to ask you kind of in closing is, and I've encountered this recently as a practical thing of, for wives that are listening, that this realization of how incredibly strong the sex drive is for their husbands and how incredibly difficult it is for a husband to remain pure in his heart and mind. Because for women, it's like, well, Jesus says you lust after, you're committing adultery with her. You need to stop that. Get over it. Come on. Didn't we, aren't we all given the same grace? Why, if I can do it, why can't you? How can you kind of talk to a wife that's thinking these things and, how would she kind of helpfully have the attitude of support to her husband?
Sure.
Maybe he's coming out of porn or, generally he's seen it. So,
there's a couple of things I would say about this. One is that men need to understand, and women need to understand, that the answer to pornography is not sexual frequency. That's going to sound a little counterintuitive, because I know a lot of guys, one of the big lies they believe is that, single guys might say, if I was married, the problem wouldn't be there.
Right.
I could line up a whole lot of folks who would give testimonies to the opposite. So that first thing. And then even when married guys, they think, well, once I'm married, the problem's going to be gone. And they get married. And then they believe the lie, if my wife was more this or less this, then I wouldn't be drawn to porn. That's also a lie. If she was more sexually vibrant, if she was bustier, if she was thinner, if she was prettier, if she, was less of a nag, if she was whatever, they begin to think that. And they may even vocalize those kind of things to their wife, which is, pretty insidious. But nonetheless, they begin to believe these lies. And then women could also believe these lies about themselves. If I was different, he wouldn't be drawn to porn. That's a lie. Yeah. It's not true. Sexual frequency, or the right kind of sex, whatever we want to call the right kind of sex, the right kind of sex or more sex is not going to fix you in life. It does not fix you. Now, let me balance that with saying sexual intimacy in a marriage is important for all kinds of reasons. I just want to make that clear, that we want to hold those two truths in tension and say to the wife, what is going to fix your husband in the long run is not you changing your sexuality in order to make things better. That's not what's going to happen here. Now, should husbands and wives continue to build intimacy in their marriage? They should be doing that anyway. I mean, they should just be doing that anyway. That should just be par for the course of marriage, whether the guy's been addicted to porn for 20 years or hasn't seen it a day in his life. Intimacy in marriage, emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual, in all levels, is important no matter what. It's important for the health of the couple. So absolutely. So, but that said, it's not, the key to it is not, sex on demand, because no woman's going to be able to compete with fantasy and novelty.
Of course.
And two, no woman should compete with the kind of, I mean, for the, not to be crude, but the really misogynistic kind of junk that's in pornography anyway. Woman should feel that she has to do that, because it's, rather, a lot of it's rather abusive.
Absolutely.
So, and when a guy 100%. Conditions his mind for that kind of stuff, that's not a good idea. So anyway, so that's not the goal. But I will say this: emotional intimacy is vital for the health of a couple's marriage. I resist even talking to wives about, because that's one of the most common questions we get from women. How can I help my husband? I almost always resist even giving them advice right away about this, because I don't think many wives even know the level of trauma they're experiencing because of his porn problem.
Absolutely.
And I don't ever want to put a woman into a position where she feels this sort of pressure to have to play the counselor or the mother to her husband. I think that's a very unwise position for a wife to be in. And a lot of men will even try to put their wives in that position. They don't want to talk to anybody else about it but their wives, some of them. Once the secret's out anyway, and their wives know that what's going on, they'll be like, I don't want to talk to my pastor. I don't want to talk to the counselor. I don't want to go to that quack. I don't want to go. Let me just talk to you. You can be my accountability partner or whatever. I just think that's a very – I think that is a precarious situation for a couple to be in. I don't think it's wise, especially since she has got trauma. She may not even be aware of feeling that and that trauma is going to spill over not just into her marriage but to all of her relationships, and that's not good. So I resist even telling women this is how you fix your husband, because I think that's sometimes even the asking the question, it's asked in a way that's not that's not where you are right now. You're not the doctor, okay? But I will say this: a big one is, first, work to understand his porn problem. So both the nature of porn addiction in general and maybe the underlying issues that have contributed to her own husband's problem. So obviously the big underlying issue is sinfulness, is his sinfulness. That's the core problem. But a man's experiences in his life will have shaped his personal style of sinning. So that might be, he was exposed to porn when he was 8. Or he was sexually abused, or his parents didn't teach him about sex, or whatever. It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
Those experiences are good for her to hear about and to recognize. At one point, her husband was a little boy too, and also had, he had to figure things out, and maybe didn't get all the opportunities to figure stuff out that he could have. That doesn't make him non-responsible, but it does make him. But it does help. I think it does help the wife to at least understand. Okay, this is where the problem started. Yeah. I'm not the source of the problem because, if he's been watching porn since he was 8, that it goes back that far. So I'm not the issue here. If your listeners want to get a great book, we put it out. It's for free on our website. It's called Porn and Your Husband. It's on the Covenant Eyes website. If you go to the bottom of the website, you'll see a link there. It says ebooks. You can go there and download it for free. It's called Porn and Your Husband. It's like it's sort of an emergency kit, if you will, to walk you through exactly what you need to do as a wife. I think one of the biggest things as a woman that we can do, that women can do, is to battle the lies that are going on in her own mind about the nature of the problem. Because believing those lies will inevitably spill over into the way she relates to everything and everyone, including her husband. Yeah. So getting a grip on those lies and understanding them will enable her, will equip her to put her into a position where she can forgive, where trust can be rebuilt, where intimacy can be rebuilt. Until that happens, there'll be a lot of stuff happening under the surface in her mind and in her heart. Yeah. She may not even be aware of that. is going to make it very hard for her to get close to her husband in the right way. And I think it's really important for wives to grapple with, know what those could be, know what they are, to do some real soul searching in that, and really try to figure that out, because that is going to be a huge help. Huge help.
Yeah, I thank you so much for that, because I think as women it is so easy to point the finger at yourself and say, well, I must be broken, I must not be good enough, and that's a huge temptation that the enemy just feeds on all day long. He's just like, oh yeah, you're not good enough, all these other problems, and that's exactly what in terms of what makes a woman feel most ashamed, is that she's not doing everything perfectly and making it look easy. I mean, that's kind of the way our society puts pressure on her. And I just appreciate that you're saying that really the man has got to do his own work, and he's got to do this work. This is the work of a man. And I think it's also a challenge to any church members or leaders out there to say, we need to be offering this kind of support and this kind of guidance and this kind of openness in our churches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's huge. That's a huge topic.
Well, it's a huge topic, but I think we dance around it 24/7 and then act like our church isn't dealing with these things. It doesn't make any sense. They walk out of movie theaters just like we do, and our churches aren't dealing with them. So it really has to be opened up, and I just thank you for your work, Luke. The other thing I wanted to say is that kind of after a woman the husband does the hard work of getting things understood and getting things in the right perspective. I mean, one thing I'd like to encourage is anyone that's listening, make sure you listen to this over again and again and again until you get this, because Luke has got a lot of nuances that he mentions, and it's clearly on top of so much research and understanding and listening and hearing people and interviewing and his own thinking. So there's a lot here that needs to be dug into. But and I've been taking notes this whole time. I think I've got like 5 pages already. So the point is, like, get this for men. And the other thing is for women is that this is the piece I really like to focus in on, because as a woman that grew up thinking sex was dirty and bad, and that when my first marriage, when my husband wanted me to do things that he had seen in the screen, I felt disrespected. I felt hurt. I felt angry. I felt like he was doing this sin, and everything about sex that he wanted me to do was sinful. And that's the way I felt as a woman. And it wasn't until God was able to heal my heart through my relationship with my now husband, D, I call him on the podcast, that I was able to be healed and whole and felt totally loved and appreciated and vibrant and trusted and all of these things, that I was able to then go in and understand sex in the right way and be able to become a free sexual being and be able to understand, then go into the resources, then understand what all these processes need to be happening and how the physiology works and how I can be the best lover and wife I can be. And so if that hard work is done, my goodness, the kind of intimacy that you can experience and understand is mind-blowing. It's not this cheap imitation, but as a wife, opportunity to be that and so much more to your husband, because you understand your husband. You understand what he craves and desires, and you want to meet his need in that desperate, deepest way that he craves sexual love. You are that amazing, life-giving source, not that that's your only value or that's your, this disrespected way, but really understanding that this is what God designed when he said he made male and female in the image of God, and for that reason they are to become one flesh. I mean, God has made it in this amazing, beautiful way, and don't get the lie that it's all bad or it's all good, or, it's the lie that the enemy, he's the father of lies. He's trying to trick you in every area. But God has a beautiful, life-giving, saving grace that he's given us in the opportunity of intimacy in our marriage.
Oh, man. Isn't that the truth? God cares so deeply about your heart. Whether you are a man who's listened to Luke give a picture of what a real man's fight should be all about day by day, or whether you're a wife and you see yourself in my shoes and you've walked similar roads or different roads but similar heartache, I just want to say you are not alone. I would love to have you on the webinar, delightyourmarriage.com/webinar. Please sign up. Otherwise, let this sit with you. Let this be something that matters to you and your heart. Lord, I ask in the name of Jesus, anyone who has been provoked by this message, whatever it is that you're doing in their heart, God, I ask that you would continue it. Lord, that you would be faithful to continue the good work that you have begun in this person, this husband, this wife, this young adult, in Jesus' mighty name. Whomever it is, God, you know their name, you know their story, and you love them so very, very deeply. Amen. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for praying. Thank you for being a part of DYM. It matters. Luke has actually got some more insights that I wanted to release in a third episode. That's actually a bonus coming out tomorrow, which is coming out Friday. If you're listening in the future, it doesn't matter. It's just the very next episode, 41. But he's got some great stuff in that one too. So when you get a chance, definitely listen in. God bless you. Thank you. God is doing really good stuff in your heart. I believe it. I believe he's doing really, really important work, even right now. Okay. Love you. Praying for you. Bye.
Thanks for joining. If you've been inspired by this show, would you help spread the word? If you take a moment to review and subscribe, others can find us more easily. Find out how at delightyourmarriage.com/iTunes. Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.